أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونشكره ونتوسل إليه ونتوكل عليه ثم نصلي ونسلم على خير خلقه حافظ سره ومبلغ رسالاته سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين المنتخبين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: ليس شيء أشد على الشيطان من القراءة في المصحف نظرا. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam has said, nothing is harder for shaitan or Satan to bear than a person who recites the Quran by looking at the pages of the Quran. According to this hadith, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is saying that when a mu'min, when a Muslim looks at the Quran and he tries to recite the Quran by looking at it, and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obviously giving him the reward for seeing the Quran, looking at the verses of the Quran, it is a hard thing to bear for shaitan. And usually Satan or shaitan does not bear this, and he gets angered whenever he sees a mu'min, a Muslim, looking at the Quran and reciting the verses of Quran. One of the reasons of looking at the Quran and reciting has that effect on Satan is that by looking at the Quran, obviously, we are not reciting it wrongly. And if a person is reciting from his memory, whatever he has memorized, he might make a mistake. But while he's looking at the Quran, sometimes when we are looking at the Quran and we are reciting, we look at the words, and sometimes obviously we stop on those words and try to think, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to say? What is the teachings of this verse? And the wordings of the Quran, what do they mean? So this thing cannot be obtained by just reciting it from the memories. Obviously, when we are reciting Surah Al-Hamd in the prayer, we do not have attention towards the translation of the Surah Al-Hamd or maybe Surah Al-Ikhlas. But when you're looking at the Quran and you're reciting the verses, and slowly you're obviously with the tartil and the way it is said, when you recite this Quran, you look at the words, you ponder, you try to think, you ponder on the words, that why these words are there. Specifically after those things that we learn about the Quran. Obviously, most of you are the students of the vocabulary classes, and this will help you, inshallah. So, inshallah, let's have the habit of looking at the Quran and reciting the Quran by looking at it. And as it is said in the hadith that ليس شيء أشد على الشيطان من القراءة في المصحف نظرا, by looking at the Quran, inshallah. Today, inshallah, we're going to start lesson number 3, and today is our second last lecture on the Quranic crash course. And in this course, we are trying to basically tell you the basic rules of the recitations along with the Arabic accent. So what things you should be basically focusing on so that you can turn your regular accent while you're reciting the Quran into an Arabic accent. Before this, we talked about the Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma, which were the initial movements. And even before that, we talked about the heavy letters and light letters. The heavy letters, the term that we use usually in the Arabic is huruf isti'la. The word isti'la or huruf isti'la means heavy letters uh, in the Arabic language, and huruf istifal is the light letters. So we talked about the heavy letters, that there are 8 heavy letters, and the rest of the 20 letters are the light letters. After that, we talked about the movements, the short vowels, which was fatha, kasra, and dhamma, and then we explained how the voice changes when we try to pronounce the heavy letters with the fatha, or maybe with the dhamma, or maybe with the kasra. But the main difference can be seen when we apply fatha on the heavy letters, because all of them have a heavy sound. And we also gave examples from the English language, like for the letter A, we have different pronunciations, like call. Here, like the A is being pronounced heavily. Call has a sound of, the A has a sound of O. And for the word, for example, astronaut, we have the sound of A for A. Same is the case with the Arabic letters. For those for the letters which are the heavy, we have the pronunciation of O when they have a fatha. For the rest of them which are light, we have the sound of A. So moving on to the lesson 3, inshallah. It's our third lecture on the crash course. Today we're gonna start with the sakina letter, or the sukun, you can say. Sukun or sakina, basically, it means to be stationary, and that is a letter with no movement on it. So the letters that do not have any movement, or maybe you might see this sign, you might see this sign on top of the letters. So on any letter where you see this sign, it's like this. So if you see this sign on top of any letter, it means that letter is a sakina letter. Sakina means a stationary letter. And obviously we have here like a sakina letter either does not have any haraka on it. So remember, in the Quran, you might find like a word this, like this, min, without any sign on top of it. So if the letter do not have any sign on top of it, or if it contains this sign, or we have the sign here. So this is a sign of sukoon, basically. Either it has this sign on top of it, which is sign of sukoon, or it is without any sign. Inshallah, we'll explain when it has a sign of sukoon, what's the difference with the letter that do not have a sign of sukoon on top of it. But obviously, we are talking about the sakina letters that are stationary. Now, until here, inshallah, there shouldn't be any problem. Moving on to the next slide. And obviously, if we want to talk about the things here, which we just mentioned, remember that the sakina letter, obviously we said, it has a sign of sukoon on top of it, or it has nothing on it. So note that a sakina letter is always preceded by a letter with a haraka on it. So inshallah, we'll explain about it. What does it mean when we say that a sakina letter is always preceded with a letter that has a haraka on it? For example, if you can see here, excuse me, we have a couple of words. Let me just quickly change the color of the pen. And if you see the things that are in red, for example, these two letters here, they are in red. Ya has a sukoon on top of it, sign of sukoon, and lam has a fatha. Basically, when we refer to this, a sakina letter is always preceded by a letter with a haraka on it. It means that we cannot read a sakina letter on its own. We always read it with its preceded letter, with the letter before it. So for example, in the example, we had this word, na'. We pronounce these two together, na' bu-du. Na' bu-du. So this sakina letter is always been preceded by a letter that has either a fatha either a kasra or dhamma. So there should be a haraka, a short vowel before this. So here, if you see the Arabic letters with the sukoon, I try to make it red, but obviously sometimes it does not allow to just make the letters red that are for the example. For example, here we have ilayhi. So when I want to pronounce any letter with the sukoon, I will pronounce the hamza with the kasra, which is e. And I hope that you all remember 1 second rule. 1 second rule was that in order to pronounce a letter with a movement, either with the fatha, with the kasra, with the dhamma, you need to pronounce it maximum. The maximum amount you can stretch it is 1 second. E, we apply the same rule for the sakina letter with its preceded letter. E, lay, he, ilayhi. E, lay, he, ilayhi. Similarly, here we have two letters, the first two letters. So the first one has a fatha. We connect this with this, and we stop on this one. Yab, riba, yab, riba. So those who find a problem while pronouncing a letter that has a sukoon, they should remember that you cannot pronounce this letter that has a sukoon on it unless until you connect it with the letter before it that has a movement. So I'm emphasizing on the word that has a movement. A sakina letter, a letter that has a sign of sukoon on top of it, cannot be read unless you connect it with the letter before it that has a movement. So if you want to make a note, you can write down that the rule says that the sakina letter should be read with a letter that has a movement before it. And then they both of them becomes one letter. Yab, riba, yuf, yuf, sidu. We connect ya with the fa. Yuf, sidu. Mathalu, hum. Mathalu, hum. Mathaluhum. Qab, li, kum. So basically, the ones which are read, I count them as one letter. One letter. Although there are two letters, but I'm counting them as one letter. These are one letter. Kum, qab, li, kum, qab, li, kum. Fa, raja. Fa, raja. Ha, la, qa, kum. Khalaqakum. Khalaqakum. So this kum is one word, one letter. Lay, him. So we're connecting basically the one that has a movement with the sukoon, the letter that has a sukoon. So we're connecting, we are making stops. So these are kind of, we can, like, for example, if you want to give an example to make it touchable or sensible for the kids maybe or the students, you can say the way we have these speed humps or the speed breakers on the road, what happens is a car is moving, and then when there is a speed breaker or the speed humps, you slow down. You slow down for a bit, and then you continue your journey. So same is the case here. Like when you have, like in this case, for example, you're moving with the fa, and then you have a speed hump on the, or speed breaker on the kha. Ta'akhraja, ta'akhraja. Khalaqakum alayhim, alayhim. Okay, so do not read this as alayhim or alayhim, alayhim. So you stop on each of them. For example, here we have yes, tahzi'u, yes, tahzi'u. So if I want to break this word into, if you want to say like the movements that we have vowels, how to pronounce them. So yes will be one letter for me. Teh will be the second letter for me. Z will be the third letter for me, and U will be the fourth. Obviously, we are not pronouncing the ya here. Hamza is there. So I will say yastahzi'u, yastahzi'u, yastahzi'u. وَتَرَكَهُمْ بِسَمْعِهِمْ وَزَوْجُكَ وَزَوْجُكَ. So these are the basic examples of the sakina letter. So whenever we have a sakina letter, obviously we pronounce them in this way. Now, there is a technical problem, like technical, we can say, like while reciting, some people make mistakes while reciting, and they cannot join the things together. They cannot figure out like how to pronounce these things. Therefore, we brought some example here. When we are talking about the sakina letters, sometimes we have two words. For example, here, the first example here is for the for one word in which we have the sakina letters. Obviously, it is easy to identify, like an'amta, an'amta alayhim. So in Surah Al-Fatiha, you read like this. But what about this one? We have a word. This is one word, and this is the second word. If you see, the difference is, we said a sakina letter cannot be pronounced until unless it is connected to a preceded letter that has a haraka. So here we skipped one word, one letter, sorry. We skipped one letter. So in this example, we skipped one letter. All right. And now when we are pronouncing, we say ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ. All right. ذَلِكَ. So I'm making kaf with the lam, connecting kaf with the lam. So it will become one letter for me. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ or kitabu. Inshallah, we'll talk when we stop. What do we do? So ذَلِكَ الْكِتَاب. So kaf, excuse me, should be connected to the lam here. So we skip one letter. Now in this one, if you see, we have a letter with the haraka. After that, these two letters do not have a haraka. Then we move on to the third letter. So here we had one letter in this. In here, we have two letters which will not be pronounced, which we will ignore while reading this word. Muh, obviously one word, one letter, muh, connecting this to the sukun. Then we have a z. Muhzil kafirin. Muhzil kafirin. So I'm connecting za with the lam. Za with the kasra and then the lam. Muhzil kafirin. That's how we basically are reading this word. So whenever we have a sukun, we need to see. Remember the rule. The rule is a sakina letter. I will just write it down here again. A sakina letter is always read with the preceded letter. Sorry. That has a haraka. Haraka, or you can say movement or short vowel. So basically, what we are looking at is, if I see a sakina letter, if I see, let me just change the color. So if I see a sakina letter, I need to see before this letter, is there anything that has a movement? Is there anything that has a small, like short vowel or the long vowel? So I look at the fatha, kasra, dhamma. So what I need to look for is, I need to look for fatha, kasra, dhamma. Whenever I find any letter that has a fatha, kasra, dhamma, I will connect that to my sakina letter. So muhzil kafirin. But remember, even when you're connecting this za with the lam, you need to pronounce it within 1 second. Don't forget about the 1 second rule. We are still following the 1 second rule. So the sakina letter with its preceded letter that has a haraka becomes one. Muhzil kafirin. All right. So this is how we usually pronounce this. Now, in this example, like we talked about the first three examples, in the second row, first letter on the right side, if you see, we have the lam of the al-kitab has a sukun, and before that, this ta here. This ta here has a movement. So I need to connect this. But here, if you see 1, 2, 3, now I'm skipping 3 letters in between. I'm just ignoring this. Why? Because I need to reach to the letter that has a sukoon. So, utul kitab, utul kitab. So I will connect that with the lam. Okay, inshallah. Now, usually the question should be raised like in here as well, that we have a long vowel. Inshallah, we'll talk about it in the future. That what about the long vowel? Obviously, we know that somehow we need to stretch this wama because of alif. But remember, if you have a sukoon after this, or maybe a shadda, inshallah, we'll talk about shadda today as well. If you have a shadda, and if you have a sukoon, you need to connect it. You need to ignore the rest of things. Like even if you have to stretch it, you need to ignore that and directly connect it with the sakina letter, the letter that has a sukoon. So that's on the priority. So the first priority is to connect this sakina letter to something which is before it. So utul kitab wamallahu wamallahu. We don't say wamallah. That is wrong. Wamallahu. Connecting meme with the lam of Allah. Innamat tawbah. Innamat tawbah. Connecting meme with the fatha to the tawbah. Ta of tawbah. Because that has a sukoon. So this is how basically we pronounce the sakina letters. Usually in the Quranic recitation, we have seen that people get confused. For example, for like example like this, in such example, what they do is they say mukhzi al-kafirin. They try to pronounce this alif separately because they don't know what to do. There is a ya there, there is a alif there, there is a lam there. Similarly here, utu al-kitab, utu wa, or they're trying to read it like utu wa al-kitab. We said 0 means it's a silent letter, so we ignore this alif. So utul kitab, you need to connect. So remember, always remember that whenever you see in Quran any letter that has a sukoon on top of it, this is a sign of sukoon. Any letter that has a sign of sukoon on top of it, you need to connect this with something that has a movement. For example, here kaf has a movement. The one before it, or 2 before it, 3 before it. Look at the letter that has a movement. So even if you have to ignore the first letter right before that, or the second letter, just ignore them and try to reach to a place where you will find a movement. Similarly here we have, like obviously we are ignoring this alif, we're ignoring this alif, we're ignoring this wav, and then try to reach from here to ta, this letter ta, that has a movement. So we connect this ta to the lam. Utul kitaba, utul kitaba, ignoring the wav, alif, and this alif as well. Wamallahu, we ignore this alif, this lam here, and then there is a lam here. There's basically 2 lams. It's like this. This lam, alif and lam is this, the first 2. The second lam has a sukoon. The third lam has a fatha. So we try to reach to this lam basically. Inshallah, we'll open this shadda for you and explain you what is it basically actually when we're talking about the shadda. So we will read it like wamallahu inna mattawbah, inna mattawbah. So we're ignoring 1, 2, 3, and then here we have 2 tas basically. The first ta has a sukoon, the second ta has a fatha. So how we reach to this, inshallah, we'll talk about it. Inshallah, this should be clear for everyone. Now, we have some examples from Surah An-Nisa. I just brought some verses because it's good to see in the verses how they appear. How do they appear? So we're trying to, inshallah, recite it before you, inshallah. Surah An-Nisa, verse number 2, and Surah An-Nisa, verse number 18. In verse number 2, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وآتوا اليتامى أموالهم وآتوا اليتامى. I'm ignoring this wav, this alif connecting to the lam. Lam has a sukoon. وآتوا اليتامى أموالهم ولا تتبدلوا الخبيث بالطيب تتبدل الخبيث, ignoring all these ones, not reading these ones. ولا تتبدلوا الخبيث بالطيب ولا تأكلوا أموالهم. If you see تأكلوا, all of them, they've been pronounced in 1 second. ولا تأكلوا أموالهم إلى أموالكم إنه كان حوبا كبيرا. أموالهم. So 1 second rule, that the sakina letter with its preceded letter that has a movement becomes one letter. And because it is one letter, we consider it as one letter. Therefore, we need to pronounce this fatha. For example, here we have a fatha with the sukoon in 1 second. For example, here we have a dhamma with the sukoon, with the meme that has a sukoon in 1 second. So no matter whether it has a fatha, kasra, dhamma like the letter before the sakina letter, when we are connecting them, they should be recited in or pronounced in 1 second. Now, the next example here again, laysa, connecting this here, pronouncing it in 1 second. Tawba, all right. Ya'malun, we have here ya'maluna. Humul, connecting meme with the lam, obviously. Humul, and tub, tul, an. Again, we have tub, tul, an. And wahum, you can see here, a'tadna, connecting this. Hum. وليست التوبة للذين يعملون السيئات حتى إذا حضر أحدهم الموت قال إني تبت الآن ولا الذين يموتون وهم كفار أولئك أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما. أولئك, in أولئك, if you see this wav, I did not stretch this. أولئك, I didn't say that. Why? Because there's a zero. This zero says it's a non-readable, it's a silent letter. So أولئك أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما. So this is how usually we pronounce. So this is the sakina letter. Inshallah, this will be clear. If you have any questions, you can just type down your questions, inshallah, and then we will be answering at the end of the session. If my sound or voice is okay, just let me know, because I just got a message that there is no sound. Please check. Can you all hear me, please? All right, thank you. Now, moving on to the next lesson, we are on the shadda, and usually the people are more confused when they are when they get into the shadda, and this is one of the tricky things that basically confuses the reader. And when they're trying to read the words, they get usually confused while reciting the verses. So what is shadda basically itself? Shadda will turn the letter, the definition usually that we have is that the shadda will turn the letter into two identical letters. The first of these letters will have sukoon. So the first, now here are the conditions. The first of these letters, they're two identical letters. The first of them, sorry, for example, we have two identical letters. It says the first of them has a sukoon, and the second one will have the haraka. Now this haraka can be fatha, it can be a dhamma, it can be a kasra. So the first one, obviously starting from the right to the left. In Arabic, Urdu, Persian, in Arabic, we start from the right to the left, not left to the right. So do not make a mistake. So when you're moving, like reciting Arabic, you read it from right to left. So the first one will have a sukoon on top of it. The second one will have one of these movements. The reader should slightly stress and hold on to the letter and then pronounce the haraka that comes with the shadda. Shadda sign is written like this. So this is the sign of shadda, which we have here. I just wrote it down here. A W sign. You can say it's a W. You know, when we say W, usually we say it's 2U, double U. When you join these two, they become this. So W is basically can be a hint for us when we say W or W. So this is a sign where it shows us that there are two identical letters. And when we are reading Arabic from right to left, so the first one will have a sukoon, the second one will have either the fatha, dhamma, or kathra, inshallah. Now, let's have some examples. Here we have three words which have been taken from English. So I brought these examples. We say connect. So we do the same thing in English. The problem is in English, we write two identical letters next to each other. If you see here, in these three examples, we have connect, letter, common. So technically what you're doing, you're saying can, you stop on the first end, can, as it has a sukoon on it. Nect. Obviously, this is your short vowel, which is fatha for us. Okay, it gives the sound of fatha. So instead, if I say noun words, can we write down here, if we make a rule, let's write it like this. We can make this rule. There is no problem in it. Why? Because if this rule tells us the first identical letter has a sukoon, the second has the movement, so we say can, we stop on the first one, nect. So Arabs, they do this. Whenever they have two identical letters, obviously you're reading from right to left. For example, they have an example like inna. In inna, what they do is inna. This is how they read it. Letter, again, we are doing the same thing. Letter. When we connect it, we read it as letter. Now, if we make a rule of putting a W on top of T, like two identical letters, we can apply this rule. The only thing that we need to do is to make this rule in English. But we don't have this rule. This rule is in Arabic language. Similarly, common. That's how we read basically. Okay? So this W sign, remember, in this W sign, you need to slightly stress and hold it. Letter. Connect, connection, common. So you stress lightly on the letter. Now, here we have the obviously the connected form. You can see here the connected form and the disconnected form. We try to open this for you so that whenever you will see a word that contains the shadda in it, the letters that have the shadda, how to pronounce them. Actually, this inna here was this in plus na, and it became inna. So you're pronouncing this noon inna. Rabbika. It was actually Rabbika. So all together we say Rabbika. We slightly stress and hold on it. Hold and stress. Rabbika. Inna. Bashiri. When you hold it slightly and try to stress, it's basically you try to prove, like for the listeners, you try to tell them that there are two letters there. There is a shadda. There are two identical letters. If you see the first one of them is always have a sukoon. You see the sign of sukoon on top of this. The second one has a movement, fatha, kasra, again kasra. So here we have a word, a single word in which we have two shaddas. Usually people, they get confused while they see such a word which has two shaddas next to each other in the same, like here we have at least ya in between them. But there are some words in which we have two shaddas next to each other, and they get confused how to pronounce it. So now in words, if you try to open this word And even if you can write down like this, the way it's written here, or maybe you can write down like it is, you can say like, no, well, open it, li, yen, all right, plus naka, open it, Noel, liyan, naka. So this will, Noel, liyan, naka, Noel, liyan, naka, Noel, liyan, naka. That's how you can read. So either you write it this way, or you write it in Arabic. So now onwards, if you see any problem while reciting and while pronouncing the letters with the shadda, remember the only thing you need to do is to make the first letter amongst those two identical letters. The first one, give that a sukoon. For the second one, for example, this has a kasra. Leave that kasra for the second one. For example, here we had the inna. All right, in inna, remember that with the hamza, there is a noon with the sukoon. So it becomes one letter, in. And for the second one, you give the fatha, becomes na. Now, the problem occurs if you do the vice versa. Like if you give the movement to the first one and the sukoon to the second one, there will be a problem in you will face a problem. Like if you do like this, then you need to read it as inan, which is wrong. We said the sakina letter is always read with its preceded letter that has a movement. So if you change the position of the sukoon and the fatha in the shadda, for example, for in inna, it becomes inan, which is wrong. You know that it is inna. So inna becomes when you give sukoon to the first one, when you give sukoon to the first one, and the haraka to the second one, the vowel, the movement, the fatha, kasra, dhamma to the second one. So it becomes in-na altogether. So this is wrong, basically. You need to remember, the first one has the sukoon, the second one will get the movement. So basically, to open a word that has a shadda, you simply need to write down like this. Remember, the first one will have the sukoon, the second one will have the haraka. Now here the movement is fatha, so we're giving fatha to this. In Rabbika, write down like this for yourself. All right, and then first one has a sukoon, the second one have a movement. So here this ba has a kasra. We give kasra to this. Rabbika. Altogether, this will become Rabbika. Okay. So this is how basically we read the letters that has a shadda. Now here are some examples for you to see how do we basically read these words. For example, here we have the letter ba. Now, in the word, we said there are two bas here. Okay. You all know that here, if I open this letter ba, I should get two letters here. There is a ba with the sukoon, and this ba has a kasra, obviously. So the second ba should have a kasra. Now, we know that the letter that has a sukoon here, that has a sukoon or a sakina letter, we said in the beginning of the lesson that this cannot be read on its own. You need to connect it with the previous letter that has a movement. So here we have letter dal with the movement. All right. So try to connect this ba with this dal and make this one. This will become mudab. Mudab. Now the second thing is we need to pronounce the second ba with the kasra. Bi rati. Mudab birati. Now when I stress on this, it will become mudab birati. Mudab birati. Slightly stress on the letter. That's the shortcut how to pronounce it. So even if you slightly stress and hold, slightly hold and stress on the letter that has this sign on top of it, you're technically pronouncing the shabda. Mudabbirati. Now here again, if I open this dal has a sukoon and the second dal has a fatha. So I will connect this with the qaf. Faqadda فقدره. All right. فمهلي فمهلي. That's how we pronounce it. فسواك فسواك. يتذكر يتذكر يتذكر. فعظوهن فعظوهن. Now here we have two letters that has shadda next to each other. Now this is one of the places where usually people get confused, like how to pronounce it, how to connect them. Simply open this one. There is a letter dal with the sukun, the second dal with the fatha. Open this letter. A kaf with the sukun, the second kaf with the fatha. Now you need to connect this dal with this ya here. You need to connect this kaf with the dal here. All right, and then pronounce it. Sa yadh sa yadh dhakkaru sa yadh dhakkaru sayadhakkaru sayadhakkaru. So now onwards, if you feel a problem in pronouncing a letter that has a shadda, you should open that. Try to open the letter that has a shadda and try to pronounce it. So now onwards, if you see any letter that has a shadda, even if we have three letters next to each other with the shadda, doesn't matter. Even if they are like three letters next to each other that has a shadda, just open them. Try to connect the letters that has a sukoon with the one that has a movement before it, and then try to read it. So simply, if I try to read this, so here I will connect this with the dal, yad, then I have a dal with the fatha. I connect this with the kaf that has a sukoon, yad, dhak, and then ka. This is again a kaf. Obviously there are two kafs with the fatha, ka, and then at the end I will pronounce this ra. Sa yadhakkaru sayadhakkaru sayadhakkaru. That's how we pronounce. And this letter is obviously, word is وَيَتَجَنَّبُهَا وَيَتَجَنَّبُهَا جَنَّبُهَا وَيَتَجَنَّبُهَا وَيَتَجَنَّبُهَا نَارٌ مُؤْصَدَةٌ نَارٌ مُؤْصَدَةٌ. So this is how basically we read the words that has a shadda. Now for the shadda, obviously I just brought an example from Surah Al-Ma'un. We have here Surah Al-Ma'un. If I recite it, you can see Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillah, Bismillah, Millah. Obviously here are the two lambs. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين بالدين, ignoring the alif and lam here. يكذب. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدع اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين فويل للمصلين فويل للمصلين. So I'm connecting فويل للمصلين. فويل للمصلين. لام هذا شدة أو إسعاد التنوين. فويل connecting with the lam with the shadda. فويل للمصلين صلين. So there shouldn't be any problem. الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون. يراء, ra is a heavy letter. الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. So يحض فويل للمصلين الذين يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي. So we are connecting this kaf directly to the lam. فذلك الذي يدع اليتيم. All right. And similarly, the ayn with the dhamma is been connected to the lam with the sukoon. So we are covering the shadda and the sukoon, both of them, inshallah. So this is how we basically pronounce the shadda. Now, the next topic that, inshallah, we're going to cover today is tanween. And tanween is basically a word which has a noon at the end of it, a noon with the sukoon, a noon sakina. So tanween is a word and it has a noon sakina that occurs at the end of the noun. This kind of noon is invisible but readable. So invisible in sense that these are the signs, basically the signs that you can see here. So these are the signs, basically. You can see these three signs. So tanween can be written in three ways in the Quranic text. And these are according to Osman Taha script. It is not according to the Quran that has been published in Pakistan. Like there are different ways of like the signs which were added by different people. We are talking about Uthman Taha script, like the signs that he has added. So he has this sign. This is one of them, the second shape and the third shape. Now, if you see the difference of the shapes, you can see like these two fatha signs, they're on top of each other, like they're parallel and they're equal with an alif. And then we have two kasras. And then this is a dhamma and a reverse line, or it can a reverse dhamma on top of it. So this is how the first shape is. The second shape is like, if you can see, like the fathas, they're not like on each other. It's a bit like far away from each other. The top one is a bit on the right, the lower is on the bit left, or maybe in different scripts, like the top one is a bit on the left and the right one is on the bottom one is a bit on the right. So the kasra tanween is the same. In the dhamma tanween, you can see like the both dhammas are facing the same way. The third shape of tanween tells us that there's a fatha with the mim, kasra with the mim, and a dhamma with the mim. So these are the three shapes. Remember these three shapes for those who know tajweed. This is not a tajweed class. For them, just giving them a hint why this is so. This shape is for the rule of idhar. In the tajweed for the noon sakin and tanween, we have four rules. The first shape is for rule of idhar. The second shape is for the rule of idgham plus ikhfa. And the last rule is for iqlab. I might tell you what is iqlab, what does iqlab means, because you might have seen, for example, this does not allow me to just. All right. So this is the rule of iqlab. All right. Now, what is the rule of iqlab? You might have seen noon with this meme, like in the Quranic text, and or fatha with the meme. This is when a noon that has a sukoon or a tanween, after that, whenever we have a letter ba, this noon or meme, like this noon, changes to meme basically. So that is the rule. This is the simplest rule, like in the rules of noon, sakin, and tanween. That's why I'm just telling you now here that whenever you see a fatha with a meme, a tanween with a meme, a dhamma with the meme, a kasra with the meme, just look, there should be a letter ba right after that. There must be a letter ba after that. And this is the rule of iqlab basically. The noon changes to meme. So that's why we have this rule. So basically in Usman Taha's script, the signs that he added in the Quran, we have these three shapes of tanween that you will see. Now, what does tanween is and how to pronounce it? As we said, like the tanween is a word, is a letter that has a noon at the end. And the examples like here we have like ba plus noon sakinah is ben. But we write it like this. In the written form, it's been written like this. Bin, bun. All right. So you're doing nothing. You're connecting this to noon sakina, and then you're pronouncing the sound of the movement. Bun, bin, ben. All right. For example, here we have tayran. Ra is a heavy. So whenever ra needs to have a fatha, it will become ra. Like ra, the letter ra with the fatha is ra. And if you add a noon at the end, it will become run. Tayran, tayran, tayran. Quray, shin. Quray, shin. Ahadun, ahadun. حلالا يومئذ كتب ترابا. Obviously it's meme, so I'm not more saying noon like pronouncing noon. I'm pronouncing noon here. Obviously we are just telling you the basic rules, not the tajweed rules. So ترابا شقاق أليم أليم. Technically, when you have this type of tanween, like with the meme, you should not join your lips. You keep your lips open and then you get prepared or get ready to pronounce the letter ba, which is after these tanweens usually. So turaban, and then obviously if it is a ba or obviously definitely there's a letter ba after it, so you get ready to pronounce that. So turaban, for now, just remember that there is a meme, shiqaqim and ali mum. So this is how we basically deal with this. Now, example and explanation. Obviously, we just said that this is not ahad, this is not ahadu, this is basically a hadun, noon with the sukoon. It ends with the noon that has a sukoon. And Quraishin. Sorry. I should be adding one more thing to this. Obviously, in order to write noon, this should be like this. Quraishin. Now, one thing remember, this is a universal rule you need to remember. This relates to Arabic grammar. And if you're making your notes, just write down. Tanween is not the part of, this is R, part of the word. For example, here, ahadun, this noon is not the part of this ahad. Tanween, so the first thing is you need to remember that tanween is not the part of the word. The second thing which you need to remember, tanween is the sign of noun. If noun do not have alif lam in the beginning, so basically, sorry, in the beginning, if this ahad had an alif lam like this, al ahad, I will never see a tanween on top of this. Tanween is not the part of the word. Remember, tanween is only a sign of a noun. If I write al-Quraysh, al-Quraysh, it will be like al-Qurayshi without any tanween. But if I do not bring alif lam in the beginning of Quraysh, I need to bring a tanween. This is the grammatical rule. The Arabs, whenever they bring a noun without alif lam, they put a tanween at the end so that they know that this is a noun and not a verb. The verb in the Arabic text, in the Arabic language, the verb never had a tanween or alif lam in the beginning. So make a point now, you can write this down for yourself, that a verb in the Arabic language never has a tanween nor alif lam in the beginning. So alif lam or a tanween. The verb do not have these two. Verb never gets a tanween or alif lam in the beginning. So this is a sign of a noun. But obviously when we bring a tanween in Arabic itself, it said anything which ends with the noon, but that has a sukoon, having a sound of noon. So that's why we have the sound of noon. So ahadun. So remember, if you see this thing, you should read it as this. Quraishin, you will read it as this. Quraishin. All right. So this is how we read in the middle of the verse. At the end of the verse, what do we do? Inshallah, we'll explain later. Now let's go on to the some of the we can say like examples. And all right. So this is the second last slide. We have here examples for the tanween, and now the problem is I will leave this for now. I will move on to the last slide to explain you this, and then inshallah we'll go back on this example. Now, in the Quran we have Surah Al-Ikhlas, and alhamdulillah all of you have memorized Surah Al-Ikhlas. The point is, sometimes due to some reasons we might not wake up on time, like for the Fajr prayer, and we might wake up like 3 minutes before the sunrise or maybe 5 minutes before the sunrise, and we don't have enough time to read the Quran like slowly, each verse slowly. So we try to read the surahs fastly. Now the rule says that if in order to read fast, like if you want to read Quran or the surahs fastly, you need to know the endings of these verses. Okay, like Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, ni. So you need to pronounce all these movements at the end of these verses, instead of saying like Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Now you need to continuously connect all these verses to each other and then try to pronounce it. The rule says you need to remember the endings of these verses. So that is very important. So now onwards, the surahs that you read in the prayer, try to remember the endings of each verse for that. So in case if you're late, or maybe there are like 5 minutes for any reasons, we wake up late and then there are only 5 minutes or 4 minutes or 2 minutes left, and we need to quickly offer the Fajr prayer, or maybe Maghrib, Isha, or Dhuhr, Asr, it depends which prayer are you praying. So you need to connect all the verses. For example, you need to read it like Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. This is how you need to read. Now, the problem is, most of us, when they connect these two verses, they make a mistake. The problem is, whenever we are reading this ahadun, we know that this ahadun has a noon when we are continuously reading it. So we need to pronounce this noon with the sukoon on top of it, ahadun. The problem is, after this we have an alif, and then we have a lam. After this lam, we have a lam. If I open this word, the word Allah, so this is alif, lam, there is another lam, the third lam, and then the ha. This lam has a sukoon, this lam has a fatha. The problem occurs when you need to connect this noon that has a sukoon on top of it with the lam that has a sukoon. So there are two sakinas next to each other. we said in order to read this sakina, obviously we're connecting this to the letter that has a movement before it. What about this lam? What to do with this? Before this, if we see, we can only find that the noon has a sukoon and dal has a dhamma. There is a universal rule. Let me write down here, universal rule. Universal rule in the Arabic grammar. And that is whenever you have two sakinas next to each other. There are two sakinas next to each other. To the first one, give a kasra and make it readable. So if you have two sakinas next to each other, for the first one, you need to give a kasra in order to make it readable. In 98% cases, we do this. There are some other cases where the Arabs, they give fatha or the dhamma, all right? Now, let's leave it on them. Obviously, they know the rule. For now, for us in the Quran, wherever you see such a case in which you have two sakinas next to each other and you don't know what to do, give kasra to the first one, all right? And in this way, you will be reading it as ahadunillahu samad. For example, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahadunillahu samad lam yalid wa lam yulad. Obviously there is a sukoon, so I can't do anything with this. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. All right. So remember that whenever there are two sakinas next to each other, so the rule is when we see two sakina. Sakina letters mean two letters that has sukoon. Two sakina letters next to each other. In order to make it readable, give kasra to the first one. Now, as we are reading Quran, we know that we read from right to left. So the first one will be the one that is on the right side. And the second, this is the first one. And the second one is that is on the left side. So basically, if we have the word ahadun, and then we have the word Allah, this is basically, we know that this is, let's open this and write down like this, ahadun, then the word Allah. And then we give kasra to the first one. Ahadunillahu samad. So it's now easier to read ahadunillahu samad. We cannot say ahadullahu samad. That is wrong. Ahadunillahu samad. Now, moving on to the slide of tanween and sukoon. I just brought three examples for you, and there are a lot of them in the Quran. Usually in the Quran, like the Urdu Quran and the others, you might see a noon, small noon here with the kasra. They usually put a noon there so that you know what to do. But technically, you should know that this is a rule, a universal rule in the Arabic language, that whenever they come across such a word, they give kasra to the first one. So Surah Al-A'raf is the first example. The verse is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ساء مثلا القوم الذين كذبوا بآياتنا وأنفسهم كانوا يظلمون وهي تجري بهم في موج وهي تجري بهم في موج كالجبال ونادى نوح ابنه وكان في معزل يا بني اركب معنا ولا تكن مع الكافرين. So نوح ابنه. In Surah Al-Maryam, we have example, يا زكريا إنا نبشرك بغلام اسمه يحيى لم نجعل له من قبل سميا. So بغلام اسمه يحيى. Now, if I want to just share the Quran with you guys, inshallah, you can see that even here, like we have like the noon with the meme, obviously we talked about that. There are different places. If I can search, let me see. In the surahs that we have here in the Quran, we have all these examples. So first of all, we talked about the Sakina letter and how to connect them, how to read them. 1 second rule. The second thing is, obviously, we talked about the shadda, how to read that, and the tanween. And then we had different situations within the tanween. For example, here, if you see, we have like, لم يكن الذين كفروا لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين. Munfakin, noon has a stationary, obviously does not have a sign of sukoon on top of it. There is a reason for this. In Usman Taha's script, obviously he left this sign of sukoon on purpose because he put a sign of sukoon for the rule of idhar. He do not put a sign of sukoon for the rule of idgham and ikhfa, and then a meme for the ighlab. So it goes back to the rule of the rules that are set in the tajweed. And those who know the tajweed rules, inshallah, it is much easier for them to recite in this way. So, وَالْمُشْرِكِينَ مُنْفَكِّينَ حَتَّى تَأْتِيَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَةُ هُمُ الْبَيِّنَةُ. So I'm connecting the, let me make it a bigger. So I'm connecting the meme with the lam, هُمُ الْبَيِّنَةُ. رَسُولٌ, obviously meme with the shadda, so there are two identical memes. رَسُولٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ يتلو صحفا مطهرة فيها كتب قيمة. There's two ya, قيمة. وما تفرق الذين أوتوا الكتاب. Now أوتوا الكتاب, if you see, I've just ignored this wav, alif, there are two alifs here, and I connected that with the lam. وما تفرق الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءتهم البينة هم البينة. So now onwards, one should not read it like إلا من بعد ما جاءتهم البينة. This is wrong. So you need to consider like there's a dhamma there, and then you need to connect it with the lam. Now, usually remember that whenever we are reading the Quran, and if we are stopping at the end of the verse, if you're stopping at the end of the verse, we do not pronounce the last movement of the last letter. For the last word, the last letter, the movement that it has, we do not pronounce that movement. Instead, what do is we usually like deal it as a stationary. For example, يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث. I stop on tha without pronouncing anything. Okay, al-qari'ah. This kind of tha becomes ha. We ignore the dots and the i'rab as well. Al-qari'ah, mal-qari'ah, وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالإحن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية Okay, so that's how we read. Now, one of the technical points, which usually we are unaware of that, when we are dealing with this, when we are dealing with the tanweens. Now, if you see, you can see that with all the fatha tanweens, sorry, with all the fatha tanweens, if you have noticed, there is an alif. Whereas we do not have this alif, waw, or ya with the rest of them, only with the fatha tanween. And that is because when you stop on a fatha tanween and it is the end of the ayah, you need to pronounce alif instead of n. Like we will be pronouncing as a at the end. Now let me just go back to the Quran. Giving you an example from the Quran, inshallah. We have this a lot on the like Surah An-Naba, Juz 30. At the beginning of the Juz 30, we have a lot of these verses. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عما يتساءلون عن النبع العظيم الذي هم فيه. Let me just bring it. Now here we have بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عما يتساءلون عن النبع العظيم. I'm stopping on the each, like the end of the each verse. الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مِحَادًا. Now if you see here, we have a fatha tanween with the alif. But when I'm stopping, instead of pronouncing mihadan, it will become, or mihad, it will become mihada. All right? So remember that only and only in the case of fatha tanween, this will become a instead of either making it silent. وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَجَعَلْنَا نَوْمَكُمْ سُبَاتًا وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا. So وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا وَبَنَيْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعًا شِدَادًا. I just changed the page. So this is how basically we deal with the verses, inshallah. Now, I will open the room for the question and answer. There's lots of questions from the beginning. I can see like those who have questions, let me take the answer the questions that are in the chat, and then after that, we'll take the live questions, inshallah. Obviously, these questions were during the class, so let me just take it first, and then inshallah, I will answer your question. Please keep your mics muted for now until I finish or I ask you to unmute your mics. Thank you. All right. One of the sisters, the first question is, Assalamu alaikum. Some Qurans have small circles on the letters. Yes, those circles, let me see if I can have, let me just open Tanzil for you guys. So let's go to the tanzil.net and I show you different ways of the sukoons. Like here you can see that these are the small circles. Min kulli amrin. These small circles are sukoon as well. Okay. We are talking about the Usman Taha's signs, which were added by the Usman Taha. So if I go to the Quran here, and if I change like to this, Quran, for example, you can see like the sign of sukoon is as the sign as I mentioned. Lam yakunil ladina kafaru min ahlil kitabi. So this sign of sukoon you can see is this. In some of the Qurans, yes, if you see the sign of sukoon and it is as it is like this wasn't this. Like here we have this sign of sukoon. Now the problem with this sign of sukoon is if you see on kafaru, alif of kafaru, there is a sign of sukoon. Sorry, there is a zero. And this zero tells us that this is non-readable. It's a silent letter. Okay? If someone cannot differentiate between these two signs, he might consider this alif as a sukoon, an alif that has a sukoon. And we have seen this a lot. that the people, when they recite such a word, they say, لَمْ يَكُنِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا wa. They try to pronounce this alif, or kafaru a. They try to make these kind of sounds. Why? Because they're considering this as a sukoon, whereas this zero denotes that this is a silent letter. You should not read this letter. This is a silent letter. So that's why there's the problem with these type of signs. Osman Taha, when he added these signs, he tried to make different signs for different things, which goes back to the tajweed rules. And inshallah, if there will be a time, if we have a life, inshallah, if Allah gave us tawfiq, one day, inshallah, when we'll have the tajweed classes, we will explain how those rules applied, how these signs are applied on the tajweed rules. That is the first thing. The second thing is, he tried to differentiate. If you put zero, the circle on top of each and everything, not the silent letters and the stationary letters and other things. Maybe we have the long vowels. Even on top of them, I have in some of the scripts I have seen. Maybe if I bring here, like again here we have, you see, like yatlu, kafaru. Now here, if you see, the signs are exactly same. Exactly same. This noon is not a silent letter. This alif is silent. If I want to make it bigger, so you guys can clearly see the things. Now here in this script, the signs are exactly same. There's no difference. Yatlu, the signs are exactly same for the sukoon and for the silent letters. So these are the problems basically. That's why we recommend you to take the Usman Taha, the books that have Usman Taha signs, so you can you can see the difference of that, inshallah. So that was the first question, inshallah. I've just answered it. So the second question is, how do you recite a word at the end of the ayah or before waqf? So we basically explained how do we do that. Where the second last letter has a sukoon on it and the last letter becomes sakina. All right, in Surah Al-Qadr, sorry, let me just go and open. For example, in Surah Al-Qadr, we had this example in the last lecture. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Qadr. Qadr, shahr, shahr, shahr. Obviously, these two, how with the sheen is one letter. Shahr, qadr. All right. So today you've learned how to read the sakina letter. You connect it with the other one. At the end, obviously, we need to make it silent. So that is what we usually do. So the ends are exceptional here. Amr, fajr, fajr. Anything like if we have any other example here, I can just make it more clear for you. So these two pages are this. So zilzalaha. So these are the obviously a'malahum. So this is again it has. So what you need to do is ضبحا. So here والعاديات ضبحا, ha alif instead of han. All right. لا شهيد, لا شهيد, قبور. That is how we usually pronounce these these words. Now, after this we have all right. All right, sister, is brother Mirza Askar or sister Mirza Askar? I don't know. You said like you have a couple of doubts.
Mirza is never a sister. It's always a mister. For your information,
Mr.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So there are sometimes the surnames.
No, yeah, that was at the end.
Like the surname
Actually,
comes before, like Sayyid,
yeah,
Ali Mohsin
actually,
Naqvi. We have Mirza and then anyways, inshallah.
actually, I'm a Mirza. I'm not a Mirza.
Okay, Mirza.
But anyways,
right.
let's not talk about that. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. If you have time, I don't know. There are about four questions, but they're short. So, can a Sakina letter be with what do you call Tajdeed, that is Siddha on top of it?
Yes, it can be. For example, let me just go one by one for your questions. Yes, Suratul Masad. Here we have this. In this case, it is stationary. All right, just at the end of the verse. That's what we can have. Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. So you need to stress on this ba in order to tell that there are two bas there.
Okay.
Did you get me? So while you're reciting, when you reach to such a letter, so you need to stress more on this. Like for the rest of them, I will not stress that much. Like tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب وتب. So you're stressing more on that in order to show that there are two bas there.
Okay. What if I do not know if there is one in the Quran, I do not remember, but what if there is a Sakina letter at the end of the ayat? It's where we have to stop.
Yes, we have. Surah Al-Ikhlas. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد. This is the example for that. So لم يلد ولم يولد. Surah Al-Ikhlas. Here we have. You can see this. لم يلد ولم يولد. So you simply stop there.
Okay.
There's nothing to do like.
So in other words, we do pronounce the Sakina letter.
We definitely pronounce the last letter. There is nothing like you cannot change it. You definitely pronounce it. Even if it has a movement, you need to make it as this, like silent as this.
Okay.
Like you need to make it stationary.
Since you're on this surah, that's where I had a question also, earlier too. But the first ayah, you said "Qul huwallahu ahadun," but yeah, but we never say ahadunil. We always say "Qul huwallahu ahad."
Yes, I explained that. Usually, if you're reciting and you're connecting all the verses, for example, if I ask you to recite while connecting all the verses together, how would you recite it?
Yeah, okay.
Let me take you to this one. Surah Al-Falaq. If I ask you to connect all the verses together, like first two verses, three verses, like Bismillah is a part of the first verse. So the way you will recite is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن. So you're pronouncing the last movement of the last letter. Okay, the last word, its last movement, because you're connecting the verses together. In Surah Al-Ikhlas, in this case, if I ask you to connect it, the only way you can do it is to read it like Ahadunillahu Samad.
Okay.
Because there's a tanween. There are two sakinas next to each other.
Yeah. Okay. Can you go to Surah Jummah?
Yes. Surah Al-Jummah.
Okay. Can you scroll down a little?
Verse number?
Yeah. Word. No, this is the third or fourth.
Third or fourth. All right.
Okay. Here, where there's hikmah.
This is hikmah.
Yeah. Do we say hikmah or hikmata?
Okay. Here, if you want to make a stop, then you need to say hikmah.
Yeah.
If you're stopping on this, if you're breathing at this point, If you're not breathing and you're continuously reading, you need to say hikmata.
Yeah,
Why? Because this phrase have different sentences in it. It has like هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته is one sentence.
Yeah.
ويزكيهم is the second sentence. ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة is the third sentence. وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين is the fourth sentence. So this phrase has 4 sentences in it. Or maybe we can do like 5 sentences. But the problem is, when you're reciting it, if you need to take a break in middle, you need to make a stop where is allowed, where the sentence is finishing. So this sentence is finishing here. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. This is one sentence.
But there's
so
no sign for a finish.
I know there is no sign. I know there is no sign. But you can do that. There is not a rule that you must not like do a stop here. For the reciters, when they're reciting, that's why it is said that if you do a stop here, and if you want to continue reading, start from here again, from the last sentence where you left. Basically, you read 3 sentences of this phrase, and you are out of breath. So now if you are taking a break, you want to have, you want to refresh yourself, you stop here with hikmah, and then you start again. Like, if I recite this verse this way, it will be, هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. So this is how you read. But if someone reads it after it, like stopping at hikmah and then starting from وَإِن كَانُوا مِن قَبْلُ, this is not wrong. You cannot say like he has committed a sin or this is wrong. But
Hikmah
from the
is also
recitation,
right. Hikmata is also right.
Yeah, in the continuous form, it is hikmata. If you stop, it is hikmah.
Okay. One last question. So when alif lam comes, does the word al make the word singular?
No. This alif lam is the sign of a noun.
Yeah, like
Alif
we
lam.
said the.
Yeah, the. We said the. Yes, we bring that. But it can come on the like Quddus, like ummiyin is a plural word. Al-ummiyin is a plural. Okay?
Yeah.
So here is L. L is only a sign of like L, the brings, that makes it specific. You know, there's the, for example, I say book. Yeah, it precises the thing. If I say book, in Arabic I will say kitab. But if I say al-kitab, the book, I'm specifying a singular thing. I'm precising the thing that I'm talking about this specific book. So that's why I bring the there. So this L is a sign of a noun. If a word that is a noun do not have an alif lam, it will contain a tanween at the end. For example, Rasul is a noun. If it was al-Rasul, then we should not have a tanween. But because this does not have alif lam, it has a tanween at the end.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome. So, okay. Moving on to for the shadda, is that 2-second rule? No. For the shadda, basically, we cannot say it has a 2-second rule. Just remember, for the shadda, you need to connect the first identical letter with the previous letter that has a haraka, and then pronounce the second one. And in some cases, for example, if I can if I can say this, usually for lam and ra, we do not have 2-second rule. That 2-second rule is for the rule of the noon sakina, and tanween, where we have like yarmalun, we can say. There are 6 letters yarmalun. In the yarmalun, lam and ra should be pronounced in 1 second. Mir rasul, for example, mir rasuli. You just quickly say that, mir rasuli. Min ladunka. Min ladunka. So this is tanween on lam. But for the mim, noon, for the wav, and what else I said? Mim, noon, and wav and mim itself. For these ones, like in yarmalun, for ya as well, sorry. For these 4 letters, we have a ghunna rule, which is a 2-second rule and all those things. So they're in the tajweed basically. For now, just remember the shadda is for every letter that has a shadda, we do not have any 2-second rule. Okay, you said tanween is not part of word. Is shadda part of word? Yes. Shadda is part of word. Basically, where there we have a 2 identical letters next to each other, there they write 1 letter, and on top of that they write the shadda in order to show that there are 2 identical letters, and the first one has a sukun, the second one has the haraka. The next question is also, are you going to talk about ghunna? The answer is no, because that is related to tajweed and it takes a lot of time. Obviously, the ghunna is not just about defining it. If I want to just define it, the ghunna means having a nasal sound or pronouncing a letter through nose, having a nasal sound basically. But how do we do that? Where do we apply it? It's a tajweed rule, so sorry about that. The next question is, can you explain alif maqsura? What does that do? Thank you. Alif maqsura means the small alif. Yes. Who asked this question? Let me just go back. Sister, you asked about alif maqsura. You're talking about this alif? Yes or no? Because sometimes we write something on the chat and then we mean something else. So please confirm whether you mean this or not.
Yes, Maulana, I mean the small alif, the small one. Yes.
Inshallah, tomorrow we're going to talk about this, if you mean this one, because we have this as well, and on top of ya at the end of the word, we have this alif as well, like Mustafa, Mujtaba. That is alif maqsura. And for the alif maqsura, basically, when we say alif maqsura in the Arabic grammar, we usually mean the words like Mustafa and Mujtaba, like the one that has a ya, or Musa that has a ya at the end, but it is being pronounced as alif, and it has its own specific rule. So basically, you're talking about this small alif which is here, like in Dhalalim Mubin, Kitabin.
So my question is, like, do we prolong the sound or not?
Yes.
Like, because, yeah.
Yes, we prolong this, and inshallah tomorrow we'll talk about this in detail. What are these? We have this ya as well, like ummiyin, or maybe if I can see a wav, small wav here, we have a small wav. Now, if you want to say like wav maqsura, because of its being small, so like Dawood, like innahu, here we have a wav. So inshallah tomorrow we're going to talk about these long vowels, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
Brother Murtaza asked, what is the sign on the alif that looks like dhamma? Inshallah, tomorrow we'll explain about this sign, which is here. This is Hamzatul Wasl. Just explaining you now. For now, just remember that this is Hamzatul Wasl, and we have 2 types of Hamza. This Hamza is Hamzatul Qat, that has this Hamza, written Hamza below it or on top of it. But this alif that has this sign, which looks like an alif, this is Hamzatul Wasl, and this is Hamzatul Qat. Qat means definitely or definite. Wasl means connecting alif. So this is a connecting Hamza or alif, and this is a definite Hamza that takes the i'rab or the movement. Which font are you using in the display setting? I'm just, which one? In this Tanzil, I just chose Uthmani here, or you can choose like Uthmani minimal, and it will change the, obviously the writings for you. There are different, you can say, writings. We have, sorry, here we have different fonts, so you can choose any. So right now I was on the, I think I was on this one, Naqsh or Mi Quran. So you can choose any of these. The Osman Taha's script itself has this font. This is the Osman Taha. The way they write and the signs, the way he uses. So you can see like the tanween, you can see this sign of tanween, which was the middle shape of tanween. Okay. And similarly, it goes on. And this one, like Jannatin, Alfafan, the first shape, which was on the right side. Okay. And if there is a meme, so you can see that shape of meme as well. So let me go back. So this is the first shape of tanween, the middle shape, and then the last shape. So you can see these shapes in this Quran here. It is clearly written here like Jannatin, Alfafan, and all this. There was one thing which I explained, and I said that the tanween with the meme, tanween with the meme. The meme always comes where there is a letter ba after it. So obviously this is the last verse of the surah. After this, the very first verse of the surah is Bismillah. And Bismillah is starting with the letter ba. So that's why this tanween has a meme. Why? In case if you want to connect the last verse of this verse, which is Surah An-Naba, to the first verse of Surah An-Nazi'at, you will face letter ba. And therefore, you need to pronounce meme instead of noon. So this is one of the rules of tajweed regarding the noon sakina and tanween. So that's why here, this tanween is ending with the meme, like fatha with the meme. And obviously we have the alif there, because when we stop, we pronounce the alif mad. In the case of regular tanween, we just stop, like only in the case of alif tanween, the fatha tanween, we have a pronunciation of alif. But in the case of dhamma tanween or the kasra tanween, we stop, we like apply the sukoon as we do usually in other for the other letters, like qulubun yawma idhin wajifah, qulubun yawma idhin wajifah. So this is how we recite. Now let me go back to the let me just open Surah Al-Hud. Like we have all right, those who have questions, if I haven't answered a question yet, you can ask on the microphone. If you can like unmute your mic and you can ask. By that time, inshallah, I'll try to bring up the examples that I wanted to show from the Quran. So you can see it by yourself, inshallah. And so Surah Al-Hud. All right, I need to go. Any questions in the meantime, inshallah, we'll take. So you guys can see the tanween, the way we do that. And the only thing is, whenever you will face a tanween with the sakina letter, obviously you need to deal it as two sakina letters next to each other. And then obviously you need to give a kasra to the one before it. So that's how we usually pronounce. So here are the like the verses. Any questions?
Maulana, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I got a question that I'm not sure how related is that to your discussion for today, but I was gonna see if you can briefly explain how we can correct each other when we are just reading. If I'm reciting and somebody else wants to correct me or stop me, or I can correct somebody else. Briefly, just explain the ruling so that we don't be like disrespectful to the Quran, please.
All right, Bismillah
Am I
ar-Rahman
clear?
ar-Rahim. Yes, like if someone is reciting and you want to correct if they made a mistake, yes?
Yes, sir.
Usually you can politely raise your hand or just ask them. Like for example, if someone is reading like Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, أولئك لم يكونوا معجزين في الأرض. If I make a mistake here, so if you're listening to him, you can say the correct word. You know, the way we whisper. Usually when we are reading book, if someone is making a mistake, we tell them the word. Like if he's saying fil arda, just politely say fil ardi. So he is attentive towards you. Obviously, when you're reciting and you're correcting a person, he's in front of you. You're listening a Quran from him, and he's listening from you. So they know that you are there. If he is making any mistake, you're correcting. So just say fil ardi, say the correct word, okay? Or just tell them like, read this again. You made a mistake at this place. Usually the teachers, what they do is wherever we make a mistake, I remember my teachers, when I used to make mistake, they used to ask me, either they used to say the right word if I was making a lot of mistakes. But if I wasn't making a lot of mistakes, but during my recitation somehow he heard it the other way, or I pronounced it, or I wasn't pronouncing it properly. So wherever I was making a mistake, he used to say me to repeat the whole verse again. He used to wait until the last end of the verse, and then he used to ask me to recite this verse again. You made a mistake. If I was if I got aware of my mistake while reciting, if I was correcting it, at the end he used to tell me like, this was the word which you first time recited wrongly, and now you recited it properly. But for the second time, if I did the same mistake at the same word, he used to stop me. And he used to say like, this word, you're not pronouncing it properly. Either he used to say the proper pronunciation, or obviously with the experience, if the person is making less mistakes, you just tell them, this word, you're not pronouncing it properly, pay attention towards this verse. So this is how the teachers, the Quranic teachers, they basically teach and they correct their students.
So we don't like wait till the end of the ayah. We just right at the spot we can stop them and let them repeat it or correct them or whatever.
Yes, okay. It depends. If the person is making a lot of mistakes, like on each word, if a person is making mistake, or on each second word, now this is the place where he needs to learn. He is in the learning process. He needs to know this word properly. He cannot identify the movements. He cannot identify the wording. For example, mu'jizeen, the jim, he cannot identify whether it's a jim or ha or kha, and he's reading as kha. Okay. For noon and ba, he is making a mistake. So right away, you can stop them. You can tell them like, this is not this is yubsirun, not like yunsirun, for example. If someone is doing such a mistake. So if a person is making a mistake and he's having a lot of mistakes during the verse, like recitation, you can stop them on the same spot, because you need to teach them the right way. Because what happens is, for this kind of student, if you are waiting till the end of the verse and after that you're telling them, they will not get it. When you're at the spot, you're stopping them and you're telling them, they're learning more. They're quickly they're getting attentive towards the word and the difference of the letters basically. But a person who is making one mistake or maybe two mistakes in the whole verse, so wait until the verse ends and ask them, if you know that when they recite this verse again, they will be reciting it correctly. If you know this, tell them to recite this again. But if you know that they will not be attentive towards the mistake that they've done, just tell them that in this word, for example, and in this word, you made a mistake, try to be attentive while you're reciting this. Or tell them the correct words, inshallah.
Maulana, one question may not be relevant. I need to know, how do we differentiate between seen and sa, like summer, in pronunciation? How do we differentiate?
All right. Seen, your tongue is in air. All right, like you whistle. All right. So when you're pronouncing seen, your tongue in your mouth is in air. Seen. For the letter tha, you're touching your tongue like metha. You're touching your tongue to the lower part of your front teeth, top teeth. Ma, tha, tha. Mathalul fariqaini. Fariqaini. مثل الذين مثلا. All right. مثل or مثل. والسميع هل يستويان مثلا أفلا يتذكرون.
I got it. Thank you.
مثل الفريقين. You welcome إن شاء الله. All right. The admin, if they can, I don't know if they can see the messages which are privately sent, so they can answer those questions. Those who are sending the messages privately, please contact the admin. And if you are in the Mafahim group, like the vocabulary group, so you can text on the WhatsApp, and then inshallah the answer will be given there, or the concerns that you have, inshallah. What about Sad? Sad is obviously in the Sad, you try to touch your, like the sides of your tongue to the sides of obviously your jaw, upper jaw, Sad, all right? And having a heavy sound while pronouncing. Sin, Ta, Sad, all right? Sa, Salihina, Sirat al-Ladina. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. So that is how you can, inshallah, pronounce the word. Now, Sad, and after Sad, we said we have Wad. It is neither D, neither Z. Wad, something middle. All right. So if someone says, like for Ramadan, if they say Ramadan, that is wrong. Or Ramadan, that is wrong. Ramadan, it is something in between these two. The place, the place where you're pronouncing Sad, from the same place, try to pronounce Wad. Wad, not Dad, Dad. Da is wrong. Or Dha, because it is Tada. Wad. Sad, Dad. It has a light sound of Dal. It is not Dal, basically. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. That is how we recite. Now, let me go to the surah that we had in the examples today, Surah Al-Ma'un, and I will be inshallah putting on the Khalil Husri. Let's listen to the Husri's recitation, inshallah. Okay.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدع اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
So this was Surah Al-Ma'un that we had today. If you see that Ara, Ayt al-Ra is heavy, that's we said, Ayta. So he's connecting the Sakina letter with the Fatha before it. And then obviously the Shadda letter is connected also with the preceded letter that has a haraka, because the first lam has a sukoon. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين. So this is how, inshallah, it will be pronounced. Now, if you can unmute your mics, those who have the questions regarding, Brother Shoaib had a question regarding the letters. So please unmute your mic and ask so we can have these words as well. Because by typing, I cannot differentiate. Like, are you talking about the ta, ta, or sa? So,
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Can you hear me?
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Yes, brother.
So I'm talking about alif, ba, ta, sa. So can you read like sa or sa? Like
I just explained that you touch your front of your tongue to the lower part of upper teeth. Fa, alif, ba, ta, tha, jim, ha, kha. And then we have sin. The letter sin is sin. Sin. All right? With the fatha, it is sa. You cannot read tha as sa. If the question was, can we read like the letter fa as sa? No. Obviously, each letter should be pronounced. But if you cannot pronounce this, or you haven't done enough, if you're not practicing enough to correct yourself, obviously, in the qira'ah for the prayers, the maraji, they have said, the scholars, obviously the ulama, they have said, like, if someone cannot do this, that is an exception for him. But those who can learn, who can practice this, they must properly pronounce these words, inshallah.
Jazakallah.
Welcome.
Maulana, for tha, there should be the tip of the tongue little bit out. Yeah,
It can be a little bit out, or it can just touch the lower part of the top teeth. Ta
yeah.
or ta. In the both ways, it's the same pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to your own voice, if you can hear this, if you can listen, it is the same. I said this before in the very first lecture. I said the pronunciations of the alphabets cannot be learned by these positions that we explain. The best thing is to hear. When you hear a qari, when you hear to a reciter, you know how he has pronounced, and you try to, yes, you know that what is the origin. You can learn what is the origin of this letter and how to basically pronounce it. But obviously, the best way to know how to do this is to listen to the qari. Now, I will again play the sound of Khalil Husri, Surah Al-Takathur. You can hear like how is he saying thumma and then sawfa, kalla sawfa, takathur. So this will be much more clear for you, inshallah. So let's listen to Khalil Husri, Surah Al-Takathur.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم لترون الجحيم
Now,
ثم
if you listen carefully, try to see the sounds of fatha. La, ta, ra, vun al jahim. Thumma, la, ta, a, o. La, ta, ra, vun. So I will play this verse again. me just make it a bit small so it's easier for me to manage.
لترون
لتراون
الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين لترون الجحيم لترون الجحيم لترون الجحيم لترون الجحيم.
So basically the things that we explained, like the movements of Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma, trying to remember that inshallah. And today we talked about the Sukoon, we talked about the Tanween, about the Shadda. Usually we've seen like people, they get confused when they have like وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِيَةِ. They read it as Al-Qariya. So now onwards you should not have this problem inshallah. In tomorrow's lecture we're going to talk about this alif, and we will be more talking about this and the long vowels inshallah. And after that we're going to have the questions, and if we had time we might answer some of the you can say like the tajweed questions as well. We have 3 minutes I think left from now, so if there is any question we'll take it inshallah, and otherwise inshallah we will be finishing the class. If you have any question, you can unmute your mic. You don't need to just type the questions now. So just unmute your mic, inshallah, and ask questions. So these were the lectures, obviously, that we had today. We talked about the Shadda and all those things. Remember these things, inshallah. And for the exceptional cases where we had the Tanween and the Sakin, Sukun, we gave like Surah Al-A'raf. This was verse number 177. مثلا القوم. Surah Al-Hud, Nuh ibnuhu. We have Nuh al-Mursaleen as well, or Adun al-Mursaleen. That is also in Surah Al-Hud, I think. And in Surah Al-Maryam, بِغُلَامٍ اسْمُهُ. This is the example. We have other examples as well for this type of words in the Quran, and there are like Azizun ibnu or Fisqun al-Yawm, Adnin illati, or Jaza'an al-Husna bi rahmatin idkhulu, and Khayrun nihbitu, and all these things. So inshallah, when you see this, remember that whenever you have two sakinas and you cannot figure out how to pronounce them, remember this rule that if two sakinas are next to each other, you need to give kasra to the first one, as we did here in Surah Al-Ikhlas. So now onwards, whoever wants to connect the first two verses, like the verse number 1 and 2 of Surah Al-Ikhlas, while reciting, he or she should recite it as قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ inshaAllah. May Allah give us all tawfiq to learn the teachings of Quran and to learn the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam, and to live our life according to the teachings of Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the chapter Tawbah, verse number 119, that ittaqullah wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullah wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. O believers, ittaqullah, be God-weary, and wakunu ma'as sadiqin, and be with the sadiqin, with the truthful. And obviously we know the hadith of Thaqalain tells us the same thing, that the Prophet has left the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, inshallah. So Allah may give us the tawfiq to learn the Quran, to learn the teachings of the Quran. And once we know what does Quran says, what Allah wants from us, then we are able to convey this message to the community. As we are living in the West, and obviously for living in the West, one of the conditions of the migration or those who are living in the non-Muslim country is to do preaching or tabligh. Obviously, one cannot do preaching or tabligh unless he learns the Quran, he knows the teachings of Quran, he knows the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. Even if we don't know the teachings of Quran, we cannot get into the depth of the Quran. At least we can read the translation, we can ponder on the translation of Quran and learn the things from it with the sayings of Ahlul Bayt, inshallah. May Allah cure all the people who are basically who got sick because of this coronavirus, or because of or due to any other disease or illness, inshallah. May Allah cure them soon, inshallah, give them the shifa. And may Allah give us tawfiq to be in the path of Ahlul Bayt and to be with the Imam of the time. May Allah hasten the reappearance of Imam of the time and keep us amongst his companions, inshallah. Thank you very much for attending this class. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam.